Welcome to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, November 18th, 2018, and we are live. We have a lot to talk about tonight. Last show before Thanksgiving as well. We know Thanksgiving is coming up this Thursday, November 22nd, okay? And we have a lot to talk about tonight. All right, so we saw midterm elections. You know, we talked about midterm elections last week. Last week, Sunday, we talked about midterm election results. And we saw Democrats took back control of the House of Representatives. We saw that they took back control of a number of governorships as well. Okay, and yesterday we saw that, or Friday, I think it was, we saw that Stacey Abrams acknowledged that Brian Kemp is going to be the next governor of Georgia, okay? And she's also going to launch a lawsuit as well, dealing with the improprieties that took place when it came to the Georgia election. Okay, so we'll talk some about that. But then also in Illinois, we saw the killing of a security guard at a club. African-American male, good guy with a gun. And his name was Jemel Roberson. And he was a good guy with a gun, stopping a bad guy with a gun. And he was killed by a white police officer. And you have many people who think he was killed because he was African-American. So Lee Merritt, S. Lee Merritt, is the attorney handling this case. We're going to talk some about that case. You know, and the NRA has been silent on this case also. The NRA always talks about the best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Well, here you have a security guard who was subduing a man who was firing shots in the club, in the nightclub, and the police arrive, and one officer was so threatened by this African-American man with a gun that he felt the need to shoot and kill him. He was the only officer who fired a shot. So we'll talk about that as well, dealing with Jemel Roberson. And then out of Mississippi, we have this crazy case out of Mississippi of a Mississippi senator named Cindy Hyde Smith. Cindy Hyde Smith, Republican, white female senator, who is in a runoff election against an African-American man named Mike Espy. And on the campaign trail back November 3rd, I think it was, November 2nd or 3rd, on the campaign trail, she made a joke about attending a public hanging. And she said if he invited me, referring to the person who invited her there to the rally, if he invited me to a public hanging, I'd be on the front row. Okay? And she, you know, said it was a joke. She said she tried to clean it up. She said it was an exaggerated expression of regard. I've been in a number of southern states and cities. I never heard that I never heard that expression before. So you have this now. Mississippi has a long history of lynchings. We know, and I did a 3 Facebook Live broadcast or YouTube broadcast this past week dealing with this, okay? So you could go to our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, and watch those videos I did where I broke down this story. Mississippi has a long history of lynchings, okay? And Mississippi is where Emmett Till was lynched August 28th, 1955. All right, even though he wasn't hung, that was still a lynching. August 28th, 1955. Mississippi is, when you look at lynchings that took place from 1882 to 1968, Mississippi had the highest number of lynchings. They had one-eighth of the 4,743 lynchings that took place from 1882 to 1968. One-eighth of them occurred in Mississippi. So here you have the sitting U.S. Senator, white female from Mississippi, Republican, Cindy Hyde Smith, joking about attending a public hanging. And then another video surfaced this past Thursday of her joking. Her campaign said it was a joke. A lot of people don't think it was a joke, but she said that she thought it was a good idea to make it harder for liberals at other schools, other colleges to vote. She said in Mississippi, in the history Mississippi has of voter intimidation, Jim Crow, voter suppression. Remember, Mississippi is also one of those former Confederate states as well. Okay? So this just took place like this past week. So we'll talk about that story also out of Mississippi. Now, the runoff election between Senator Cindy Hyde Smith and Mike Espy, that runoff election is November 27th, okay, Tuesday, November 27th. So African Americans in Mississippi, you have to make a decision. Do you want the public hanging woman to be your U.S. Senator, or you want Mike Espy to be a U.S. Senator? One of them is going to be a U.S. Senator. One of them is going to be your U.S. Senator. Your taxpayer dollars are going to pay their salary. The initiatives, the laws, the policies they vote on that cost money, your taxpayer dollars are going to pay for it. So who do you want to be a U.S. Senator? One of them is going to be a U.S. Senator. Even if you don't like any of them, one of them is going to be your U.S. Senator. So you want the public hanging woman, or you want Mike Espy? Okay, we'll talk about that. And then Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, the former Attorney General. We saw that Trump stuck in this fake Attorney General. Okay, Matthew Whitaker. That's a whole nother conversation. But we know that a couple weeks ago, Jeff Sessions was forced out. He was forced to resign. Okay, nice way of saying he was fired, but he was forced to resign. So before he resigned, before Jeff Sessions resigned as Attorney General, in a last-minute act, he wrote a memo that sharply limited the use of consent decrees to curb police abuses, okay, in police departments. He wrote a memo that restricted the Department of Justice ability to impose consent decrees upon police departments to curb police abuses. Because, see, you got to understand, Jeff Sessions is anti-criminal justice reform. Jeff Sessions is he's anti holding police officers accountable. When he became Attorney General, he spoke in front of a group of police officers, law enforcement professionals, and he talked about the Department of Justice needed to pull back from enforcing these consent decrees. He tried to get the Department of Justice to back out of the consent decrees with the Baltimore Police Department and the Chicago Police Department, okay? And the federal judge said, no, you have to, a federal judge would not let the Department of Justice out of those consent decrees. So when you study Jeff Sessions' history, and even Donald Trump has said, well, Jeff Sessions is against criminal justice reform. Well, Donald Trump knew that when he nominated Jeff Sessions to be his Attorney General. He didn't just find that out. He already knew that. And I know Trump did the press conference this past week, touting criminal justice reform, and it already passed the House of Representatives. It has to pass the Senate. The Senate is making changes to it. It has to pass the Senate. Trump did not campaign on criminal justice reform in 2016 and in the midterm elections. He did not campaign on criminal justice reform. He campaigned on the caravan is invading America. And then after the Tuesday election, he didn't tweet about the caravan anymore. He's only tweeted a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 times in the past few days about it. He campaigned on the fake wall being built. And now he's talking about possibly shutting down the government to extort $5 billion from the government for a wall that he campaigned on back in 2016 and said Mexico was going to pay for this wall. So he campaigned on a number of different things, but criminal justice reform in 2016 and in the midterm elections was not something he campaigned on. See, that's an initiative coming from Jared Kushner, because Jared Kushner's father went to prison, and it was Governor Chris Christie. When Chris Christie was a U.S. attorney, Chris Christie was the one that sent Jared Kushner's father to prison. That's why Christie got kicked out of Christie was part of that Trump transition team, and the reason why Christie did not get any appointment in the Trump administration was because of Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner has bad blood with Chris Christie because Chris Christie sent Kushner's father to prison. But Trump is not, he has not been an advocate of criminal justice reform. Don't be fooled at all. So we'll talk some about Jeff Sessions and what he did before he left as well. Okay. And then we know Veterans Day was this past Monday. We'll talk some about the history of an African-American female battalion that served in Europe during World War II. It's a good article about that this past week also, okay? And then the FBI reported this week, surprise, 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 hate crimes in America spiked 17% last year, and hate crimes in America have been up the past 3 years. I can't figure out why. What happened earth-shattering, to America to make hate crimes go up in the past 3 years. I can't figure it out. So we'll talk some about that as well. So on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the show. We deal with current events and history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. So you can listen to the audio podcast of this show. If you missed any of our shows, you can listen to the audio podcast there at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have almost 900 of them. Our website connects you to our YouTube channel as well. We have a recommended reading list of books at our website also. If you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, email me at info, I-N-F-O, at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Info, I-N-F-O, at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. If you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, we know Kwanzaa is coming up. I have presentations dealing with the history of Christmas, the history of Kwanzaa. Also, Dr. King Day is coming up in January. I have a presentation dealing with the distortion of Dr. King's legacy. I deal with the revolutionary Dr. King. African American History Month is coming up in February. So I have presentations dealing with that as well. Email me at info, I-N-F-O, at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. I want to thank Hartford Memorial Baptist Church. I was there yesterday and today for their pre-Black Friday holiday bazaar over at Hartford Memorial Baptist Church. So shout out to everybody over there also. Okay, we're coming up here on a break in a couple minutes here. Let's jump into this story here dealing with Jemel Roberson. Let's talk a little bit about this before the break. So this is a crazy, crazy case out of Illinois. And there have been a number of stories written about this. Washington Post has an article. They basically saw a black man with a gun. Police kill armed guard while responding to call. Okay. And they talk about how it began in a way gun advocates have suggested will curtail violence. A gun comes out, shots are fired. A good guy with a gun, quote unquote, steps in to help before police can respond. The tidy theoretical doesn't account for the chaotic unknowns when police arrive and can't tell a good guy with a gun from a bad guy with a gun. Okay, so that theory turned to grim reality at Manny's Blue Room Bar in Robbins, Illinois, outside of Chicago this past Sunday, November 11th. Police shot and killed the good guy with the gun, Jemel Roberson, 26 years old, African-American male, working security. And Adam Harris, who was a witness there at the club, told WGN everybody was screaming out. He was a security guard. And they basically saw a black man with a gun and killed him. We'll pick this up on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show, 9:10 a.m. The Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Hey, I want to let you know that we have the Meltrek animated series for our children at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. The Meltrek series teaches our history to our children using conscious hip-hop and animation, okay? Let's take a listen to the trailer here for Meltrek.
Episode 1, Exploring Ancient Africa. Witness the most accurate historical account of African-American people. A story that has never been told like this before. Join Bunchy, Chen, Percy, Michelle, and Jesse as they open their third eyes and are sent back in time by their magical teacher, Miss Lofton. They begin their adventure in ancient Africa and the Nile Valley. There, they meet a young Egyptian boy named Ramesses. Using hip-hop, funky beats, and rhymes, Ramesses teaches the children about the great kingdoms of Africa. They explore the Nile Valley. The Nile Valley was the place of Ghana is the first stop, land of the gold that they sold non-stop. Mali and Songhai. Mali and Songhai must have had some serious armies. The Congo. The Congo region is beautiful. Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's where we land. And Zulu. Witness the mental and spiritual transformation of the characters. Not only will they transform, but you will also as you travel with Meltrek. Let's resurrect the spirit of our ancestors inside all of us and recall that we all come from greatness, so we can be great. We're going to a different time zone where our ancestors always sat on the throne. Yeah, and I'm talking about you and me. Our pigmentation considered greatest in royalty. So rise up, sons and daughters of a KB land. It's time to claim our riches and take back our land. So come and take this journey, and when you come back, tell your friends and family all about the Meltrek. Meltrek, 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 Meltrek. Take it back to the basics, and talk about the Meltrek.
All right, order Meltrek today for your children and maybe for yourself at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Episode 1 deals with exploring ancient Africa. Episode 2 deals with exploring the pre-Columbian Americas. And we also have the coloring book and the full color story book. You can buy these individually, or we have them in a bundle pack that also includes Afro Man and the Protectors of the Book of Knowledge. That's available right now at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We also have the new bundle pack, The Africans That Were Here Before Columbus. The Africans That Were Here Before Columbus is an 8 DVD bundle pack. We know October 12th commemorates Columbus uncovering the so-called New World and laying the foundation for slavery, racism, capitalism, and the exploitation of indigenous people. And some people still celebrate that here in this country. I don't know why. Other people celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. But in that bundle pack, you get the double lecture I did with Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. You get a lecture from Dr. Ivan Van Sertima dealing with They Came Before Columbus. There's one from Dr. John Henrik Clark dealing with Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust. There's a double lecture from myself dealing with Columbus and the African Moors, as well as the history of Halloween and some other ones in there as well. That's the 8 DVD bundle pack, The Africans That Were Here Before Columbus. That is, I think that's on sale, $70 at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, right on the homepage. So order those today. Hey, I'll see you all this Friday, November 23rd, Black Friday, at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History for their Black Friday Marketplace. Is open to the public, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's a free event. African American vendors will be there. We'll have a vendor table for the African History Network. Our DVDs will be there also. We'll put up the flyer at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And we have the Mail Trek series. Order these today. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, animated series for our children. And you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, November 18th, 2018. And once again, we're live tonight. Hope everybody's doing well. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. All right, so right before the break, I was talking about the story out of Illinois, okay, of Jemel Roberson, okay, who was shot and killed by police, okay, and he was a security guard at a nightclub. Doing his job, he subdued somebody who came in shooting up the club, and police arrive, and they don't know he's a good guy with a gun, and they shoot him, kill him. One officer felt so threatened by him, he felt the need to shoot and kill him. Okay, so I'm still waiting on the NRA to comment on this. I'm still waiting on the National Rifle Association to comment on this. They still haven't commented on this. And, you know, they make the argument the best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Well, this is the situation here, and he's dead, and the NRA hasn't commented. So I just find that very interesting. All right. So let's go back to the story here from the Washington Post. How's everybody doing on 910 AM Superstation's Facebook page, okay? How's everybody doing? Juanita, Glenda, Anita, and Mosey. All right. So Washington Post has a good article. They basically saw a black man with a gun. Police killed armed guard while responding to call. Police killed armed guard while responding to call. So a witness who was there at the club, his name is Adam Harris, he told WGN, everybody was screaming out. Everybody was screaming out. He was a security guard, and they basically saw a black man with a gun and killed him. Now, the incident may become a touchstone in a persistent debate about how places such as schools, nightclubs, and houses of worship should steel themselves, S-T-E-E-L, steel themselves against gunmen, how they should protect themselves against gunmen. Now, that debate has gained urgency during the past year as Donald Trump and others have repeatedly said security guards, specifically armed ones, could have prevented the nation's mass shootings earlier this year. Okay? Trump tweeted earlier this year, Trump tweeted his support for the controversial idea of arming teachers. And we all remember that as well. Okay? Now, the Sunday incident has already provoked concerns that African-American men, even when legally carrying firearms or employed in a position that allow the usage of firearms, can still become a target for police fire. Now, I don't think Donald Trump has tweeted about this either. Okay, you know, Jemel Roberson was a good guy with a gun, and it's a shame he's dead. He was killed by a police officer. Trump hasn't said anything else. Hasn't said anything about this. I find that interesting. Or maybe does he think this is a local issue also? Because remember, a few months ago, White House press briefing, right? Remember April Ryan, who Trump loves to loathe and attack and talk about how poor of a journalist she is. Well, she's a fantastic journalist. Remember, April Ryan asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the White House press briefing after Stephon Clark was killed in Sacramento. She asked, with these police killings, you know, some to the effect of what does Trump think about them? Why hasn't he commented on them? And Sarah Huckabee Sanders said Trump thinks that these are local issues. And this, you know, this doesn't involve the federal government. He thinks these are local issues. That sounds a lot like state issues. But then after that, Trump was speaking in front of police officers, and he said he wanted to bring the death penalty back for killing police officers. So is that how is police killing people not a local? How's that not a federal issue, a national issue? How does that not warrant the president of the United States, or one who thinks he's the president of the United States, to comment on it? But then that same person can talk about bringing the death penalty back for killing police officers. I mean, that's what he did. So he's been silent on this also, the death of Jemel Roberson. So Roberson's friends said he had talked all of his life of becoming a police officer himself. Okay. He had a 21-year-old friend named Christian Torres who said, now you have to question the police and what they're actually doing. Okay. This is someone who was on their side. All right. And now the state police are investigating this case. All right. But in some of the stories that have come out over the past few days, they are really trying to blame Jemel Roberson for his own death and trying to exonerate the officer who killed him, whose name has still not been released, as I know of earlier today, still has not been released, trying to absolve the officer of any responsibility, even though he was the only officer who felt so threatened to kill this African-American man. Okay? Now, a few nights ago on CNN, Don Lemon interviewed Jemel's mother along with their family attorney, Esley Merritt. Esley Merritt, okay? And let's go to that clip here.
Another young black man shot and killed by police. I'm talking about 26-year-old Jemel Roberson, who was working security at a Chicago bar. Chicago area bar, I should say, because it wasn't specifically in Chicago. But witnesses say that security asked several drunk men to leave the bar, and at least one person opened fire. Roberson pinned the alleged gunman to the ground. But moments later, a white police officer arrived and shot Roberson. The Illinois State Police, now investigating the shooting, they released a preliminary report saying, in part, upon his arrival at a Midlothian police officer encountered a subject in plain black clothing with no markings, readily identifying him as a security guard armed with a gun in the west parking lot. According to witness statements, the Midlothian officer gave the armed subject multiple verbal commands to drop the gun and get on the ground before ultimately discharging his weapon and striking the subject. But tonight, the police chief is grieving Roberson's death, calling it the equivalent of a blue-on-blue friendly fire incident. Chief Daniel Delaney also wrote on Facebook, "What we have learned is Jemel Roberson was a brave man who was doing his best to end an active shooter situation at Manny's Blue Room. The Midlothian Police Department is completely saddened by this tragic incident, and we give our heartfelt condolences to Jemel, his family, and his friends. There are no words that can be expressed as to the sorrow his family is dealing with." Let's discuss now. Joining me now is Lee Merritt. He's the attorney for Jemel Roberson's family, and also Avantier Booth. She is the mother of Jemel Roberson's 9-year-old son. Good evening, 9-year-old son. I think you, yeah. I'm sorry, 9 months. Sorry about that. Good evening to both of you. I'm so sorry. Avantier, the loss is unbelievable. By all accounts, Jemel was a wonderful person, bright future, the father of your baby boy, Tristan, and now this tough time for you. How are you holding up?
I'm hurting. I'm sad.
Go on. What do you want the world to know about how you're feeling?
My baby's not going to have his father for Christmas, his birthday, any holidays anymore because a police officer took his life from him. And it's hurting real bad.
I read the response from the police department. What do you say to that, Montier?
I guess want the police officer to get his badge taken away.
Yeah. It's one thing down for them to give that lip service to say that this was a blue on blue shooting. It was friendly fire, but there's nothing friendly about it to this family. They want to see justice, and so to say that they're sad and that they're hurting, but to still employ this police officer who was in a situation that we don't believe deadly force was necessary. And mind you, the other officers who were also there on the scene, they didn't believe deadly force was necessary because they didn't use it. And so it's one thing to sympathize with the family. It's actually something completely different to take tangible steps towards justice, and they haven't done that yet. Something Avantier didn't have a chance to mention earlier. It's not only is her 9-month-old son going to be without his father, they just learned 10 days ago that they're expecting. And so she's pregnant with Jemel's second child, and he won't be able to see her through that.
Oh my goodness. So let's talk about the police department turning this investigation over to the Illinois State Police Public Integrity Task Force because it was an officer-involved shooting. You heard their statement. They say that Jemel was in plain black clothing. He was given commands to drop his weapon. You disagree with that finding.
Yeah. And Avantier can sort of bring some light to that subject, but what the witnesses say, the people who were there at the scene, they say that he was, not only was he marked 3 times over with a black cap that said security in white letters, a vest that said security on it, and a coat that said security on it in white letters. But people were around, and they were watching him subdue this would-be mass shooter, and they were screaming, "He is a security officer," as the police were shouting commands at him. But before he had an opportunity to react, this officer escalated the situation to a deadly force situation. And what we see in Jemel is what we expect from law enforcement. We expect them to come into a situation and assess and take in all the facts before escalating the deadly force. If Jemel had been a police officer and he had witnessed someone fire into a crowd like the suspect that he apprehended did, he would have been just heroic by shooting the suspect. Jemel was almost like a superhero in the sense that he not only was able to apprehend the suspect, but he even preserved his life. And to see the exact opposite of that thoughtful efforts to preserve human life, to see law enforcement officers just come out and say, well, he didn't respond to our commands. And mind you, what you don't hear, even according to their facts, they don't say, and then he made a threatening motion or there was something that he did to put other people's lives in danger. They said he failed to comply quick enough. And so we escalated to deadly force, and we killed this hero and this community champion. It's just really tragic.
Avantier, I want you to respond to this because I think it's a very cruel irony is that Jemel wanted to be a police officer, and he's lost his life doing what what police officers do, and that's trying to protect others.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
He's a protector of everybody. Anybody he knew, he got close to, he was a protector.
What do you want people to know, Avantier?
We want justice for Jemel and his family.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was a few nights ago on CNN. Don Lemon interviewed family attorney Esley Merritt, as well as the mother of Jemel Roberson. Now, when we go back to the article from the Washington Post, they basically saw a black man with a gun. Police kill armed guard while responding to call. This article is from Monday, November 12th, WashingtonPost.com. Now, Roberson had a valid gun owner's license, but did not have a concealed carry permit. WGN, local news station there in the Chicago area, reported. Now, in Minnesota, in 2016, Philando Castile was killed by an officer during a traffic stop seconds after he told an officer there was a weapon in the car. Okay, because Philando Castile had a concealed pistol license. We all remember that case. Now, details about the Illinois shooting were unclear. Monday, Midlothian Police Chief Daniel Delaney said in a statement that officers from his department and the Robbins Police Department responding to a shooting found multiple victims inside the bar. The statement said the, quote, Midlothian officer encountered a subject with a gun, end quote, and shot him. Delaney did not elaborate on what occurred before the police response. Okay. Now, the incident began with a confrontation involving several men, and a man left to retrieve a gun. He returned to the bar and opened fire, striking several people. This was reported by the Chicago Tribune, citing remarks from Robbins Police Chief Roy Wells. At least 4 others were injured. Jemel Roberson returned fire and apprehended one suspect, according to the Chicago Tribune, as officers from suburban police departments responded. It is unclear how the killing unfolded from there. At this point, it was unclear how the killing unfolded, and still there are questions that need to be answered, like why did this officer feel so threatened that he had to use deadly force? Okay. So if there was an article from news1.com from November 16th, from Friday, November 16th, entitled, "He Just Started Shooting." He just started shooting. Cop shot Jemel Roberson out of fear, eyewitness says. Cop shot Jemel Roberson out of fear, eyewitness says. The narrative surrounding the controversial shooting has taken twists and turns nearly a week later. Okay, so in the article, it says the police officer identified himself, but only a split second before he started shooting. An eyewitness near the nightclub where Jemel was working Sunday night told the Chicago Tribune in a report published on Friday, November 16th, because witnesses are being interviewed. Some witnesses are being interviewed by the media. So they're saying, well, the officer identified himself, but he did not give Jemel time to respond. He, quote, didn't give the guy any chance to identify himself or anything, said Jeff Carey. Quote, he just started shooting. I think it was more out of fear. You know what I'm saying? Just fear, end quote. So at the time of the shooting, Roberson, we know, was subduing a man. He had his knee on the guy's back and had a gun pointed at him because he had returned, Jemel had returned fire. That's when the Midlothian police officer responding to a report about gunfire shot and killed Roberson, who was armed and he was licensed to carry a gun in, doing security in that situation. Okay. One of Roberson's colleagues, who was also working security at the club that night, told the Chicago Tribune that another responding officer said the shooting never should have happened. Another responding officer said the shooting never should have happened. Quote, one cop, he said, quote, man, you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to do that. We know these guys. We told you they're security, end quote, said Dorian Myricks, I guess is how you pronounce his last name, Myrickes, Dorian Myricks, who was also injured in the shooting. There was also potentially a racial angle to the fatal encounter. According to family attorney Esley Merritt, who we just heard in the clip from CNN, and S. Lee Merritt posted this on Twitter. He said, quote, investigators claim all the shooter saw was black. All the shooter saw was black, quote unquote. That is exactly the problem. It seems all cops ever see is black, end quote. Now, like with the Laquan McDonald shooting in Chicago, there have been suggestions of police trying to cover up to protect one of its own. The Illinois State Police, which was conducting the initial investigation into the killing, released findings on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, November 13th, that contradicted reported witness statements. Okay, community leaders and activists were gathering at the Midlothian Police Department on Friday morning, Friday, November 16th, to demand answers, including the name and other information about the officer who fired the fatal shots, even after other witnesses yelled that Jemel was a security guard protecting others from a gunman. So it seems like the good guy with the gun only doesn't work for black people. And the NRA is still silent. So Jemel, who was being held as a hero, was also a father, as we heard in the clip that we just heard from CNN. He was expecting his second child as well. They just found that out a few days ago. Okay. Now he was working extra shifts as a security guard to buy holiday gifts for his 9-month-old son and his son's mother. Okay. And that's according to a report from CNN. His mother, Avantia, said, quote, Jemel loved his baby so much, and it's just crazy. Police officers just took him away, end quote. Read this article from news1.com. News1.com. He just started shooting. Cops shot Jemel Roberson out of fear, eyewitness says. This is from November 16th, 2018. And they have the link to the article from the Chicago Tribune also. So check that out as well. And then, okay. All right. You listen to the African History Network show, 910 a.m. Superstation. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. You know, I just find it so shocking that the NRA is silent on this. I can't figure out why. I don't understand why. The National Rifle Association is shocking. But, you know, you study the history of the NRA. You know, NRA was not for the Black Panther Party for self-defense to carry guns in California. Okay. When you study the history of the NRA, history.com has an article about this. And I can't figure out why. March 22nd, 2018, the NRA supported gun control when the Black Panthers had the weapons. The NRA, who normally does not support gun control, when the Black Panther Party for self-defense there in California learned California state law and learned they can open carry and use the law like white people were using the law, now all of a sudden the NRA supports gun control. Back in the 1960s, even the NRA supported gun control to disarm the Black Panther Party for self-defense. With each passing day, the debate for or against gun control rages on within the United States. And although the National Rifle Association currently leads the charge for the rights of citizens to carry guns of all types with little to no interference from the government, the original gun rights advocates did not take that stance were the Black Panthers. The original gun right advocates to take that stance were the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Throughout the late 1960s, the Black Panther Party for self-defense, they call it, now in this article here from the history.com, they call them militant black nationalist group. Now, they ain't called George Washington and the American revolutionaries, they ain't called them militant, who took up arms against Lord King George III, took up arms against Britain, okay, and launched the American Revolutionary War. They don't call them militants. I read the articles from history.com. This is how I can tell it's written by white people. Okay, but they do have some good articles, but I just have to point that out. Okay, so so throughout the late 1960s, the militant black nationalist group, their words, used their understanding of the finer details of California's gun laws to underscore their political statements about the subjugation of African Americans. In 1967, 30 members of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense protested on the steps of the California State House armed with .357 Magnums, 12-gauge shotguns, and .45 caliber pistols, and announced, quote, "The time has come for black people to arm themselves," end quote. Now, to the display so frightened politicians, including California Governor Ronald Reagan, used to be an actor, acting with a chimpanzee, and then he became president, right? That it helped to pass the Mulford Act, okay, M-U-L-F-O-R-D, the Mulford Act, which was a state bill prohibiting the open carrying of loaded firearms, along with an addendum that prohibited loaded firearms in the state capitol. The 1967 bill took California down the path to having some of the strictest gun laws in America and helped jumpstart a surge of national gun control restrictions. This was all because black people learned the law and started arming themselves. Because it was legal to do that in California. You know, it's just like, if you study Virginia during slavery, prior to the Nat Turner Rebellion of 1831, it was legal for slaves to learn to read and write in Virginia. Prior to the Nat Turner Rebellion, okay, that started August 21st, 1831. But Nat Turner was literate. He could read and write, and he could read the Bible. And he used the Bible as a weapon that said that his people were supposed to be free. So after the Nat Turner Rebellion, after they execute Nat Turner on November 11th, 1831, the state legislature passed a law that made it illegal for slaves to learn to read and write. It was legal before then. Okay. It was legal before Nat Turner. So this display so frightened politicians, including California Governor Ronald Reagan, that it helped to pass the Mulford Act. Okay. Now, Adam Winkler is the author of the book Gunfight, The Battle Over the Right to Bear Arms. Gunfight, The Battle Over the Right to Bear Arms. And he said, quote, "The law was part of a wave of laws that were passed in the late 1960s, regulating guns, especially to target African Americans. Quote, including the Gun Control Act of 1968, which adopted new laws prohibiting certain people from owning guns, providing for beefed up licensing and inspections of gun dealers, and restricting the importation of cheap Saturday night specials or pocket pistols that were popular in some urban communities," end quote. Now, in contrast to the NRA's rigid opposition to gun control in today's America, the organization fought alongside the government for stricter gun regulations in the 1960s. This was part of an effort to keep guns out of the hands of African Americans as racial tensions in the nation grew. The NRA felt especially threatened by the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, whose well-photographed carrying of weapons in public spaces was entirely legal in the state of California where they were founded. So, see, you got to understand, you know, Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, these were college students. Huey P. Newton's one of my frat brothers. He's a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. I never met him, but he's one of my frat brothers. These were college students. They were studying the law. They learned the law, and they learned it was legal to open carry. So that's what they did. So then, they changed the law on them, okay? The Black Panthers were innovators in the way they viewed the Second Amendment at the time, said Adam Winkler. Rather than focus on the ideal of self-defense in the home, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense brazenly took their weapons to the streets, where they felt the public, particularly African Americans, needed protection from a corrupt government. And see, they were trying to protect the community from police brutality and monitor police, get the badge numbers, things like this, protect the community from police brutality. But they were also trying to protect the community from the drugs and the drug dealers and things like this, the drugs put into our communities as well. Quote, we'll go to the phone lines in just a minute here. Quote, these ideas eventually infiltrated into the NRA to shape the modern gun debate. As gun control laws swept the nation, the organization adopted a similar stance to that of the activist group they once fought to regulate, with support for open carry laws and concealed weapon laws high on their agenda. All right, so you can read the rest of this article. This is from History.com, official website of the History Channel. History.com is written by Thad Morgan, March 22nd, 2018. The NRA supported gun control when the Black Panthers had the weapons. See, rabbit hunting is never fun when the rabbit has the gun. Let's go to Michael, line 1. Hey, Michael, welcome to the African History Network show. Thanks for holding. Tell us where you're calling from.
Hey, I'm just thinking about when you was talking about the police shooting in Illinois there.
Yes.
I just think about the media and their sources. They always quote the police on everything. The police is never wrong. They always write about that. And I just look at the network programming, how many programming police dramas that's on TV and everything. You never see the police killing a guy because he's black. And I've got give that limits of credit to put that on, but it's just it never ending. It never lets up that the police can't do any wrong, and most Americans believe that. You know, the random violence toward black males. You know, we can't never get a foothold. Hopefully, this Congress, they see more and more black women in the Congress they never seen before. So maybe they'll come around and report on that. But other than that, I just hope that our votes, even though we try to get everybody to vote, people just don't want to believe that their votes matter. And I just
a lot of those people that don't think votes matter play the lottery every day. They keep doing that and pay their money to do that. I can't figure that out. But okay, all right, Mike. Thanks for calling.
I appreciate it.
Hey, Mike, which city you calling from?
I'm calling from Saginaw, Michigan.
Saginaw, Michigan. Okay, all right, Mike. Yeah. Thanks for calling. Let's squeeze in John before the break. Hey, John, welcome to the African History Network show. Where are you calling from?
Well, Hotep, I'm calling from the east side of Detroit.
Okay, go ahead.
And thank you for educating this fellow just got off the phone. He's searching for an excuse about not voting. I don't understand African Americans. They always try to search for some type of excuse for not voting. And they got this vote, just as you told them. They're standing in line for weeks and months and hours for the lottery and so forth. So thank you, Hotep, for educating them and educating the rest of the people out there about voting. They got the vote. Now, Hotep, I want to say to you, California, the Democrats swept California. You don't have a Republican and nowhere out there in California right now. So I just wanted to let him know that maybe they can put this Democrat in work and make them sign some bills that to keep these thug police officers off the police force. So I just want to say that to you. Thank you. Keep
all right, John. Thanks for coming up on the break.
Have a good day.
All right, thanks. Hey, those watching on Facebook, let me know if you can hear okay. Post a comment there. Let me know if you can hear okay. Those watching on Facebook, 910 AM Superstation on Facebook Live. You listen to the African History Network show, 910 AM Superstation. I'm Michael Imhotep. When we come back, we'll talk about Senator Cindy Hyde Smith out of Mississippi and her public hanging comments. Oh, you don't want to miss this. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show. In our second hour, time goes by very quickly here. It is Sunday, November 18th, 2018. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. Hey, I want to let you know that we have the Mel Trek animated series for our children at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. The Mel Trek series teaches our history to our children using conscious hip-hop and animation, okay? Let's take a listen to the trailer here for Mel Trek.
Episode 1, Exploring Ancient Africa. Witness the most accurate historical account of African-American people. A story that has never been told like this before. Join Bunchy, Chen, Percy, Michelle, and Jesse, as they open their third eyes and are sent back in time by their magical teacher, Miss Lawful, they begin their adventure in ancient Africa and the Nile Valley. There, they meet a young Egyptian boy named Ramesses. Using hip-hop, funky beats, and rhymes, Ramesses teaches the children about the great kingdoms of Africa. They explore the Nile Valley.
The Nile Valley was the place of Ghana is the first stop, land of the gold that they sold non-stop.
Mali and Songhai.
Mali and Songhai must have had some serious armies.
The Congo.
The Congo region is beautiful.
Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe's where we land.
And Zulu. Witness the mental and spiritual transformation of the characters. Not only will they transform, but you will also as you travel with Meltrek. Let's resurrect the spirit of our ancestors inside all of us and recall that we all come from greatness, so we can be great.
We're going to a different time zone, where our ancestors always sat on the throne, yeah. And I'm talking about you and me, our pigmentation considered greatest in royalty. So rise up, sons and daughters of a KB land. It's time to claim our riches and take back our land. So come and take this journey, and when you come back, tell your friends and family all about the mail track. Mail track, mail track, mail track, mail track, mail track, mail track. Take it back to the basics, and talk about the mail track.
All right, order mail track today for your children and maybe for yourself at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Episode 1 deals with exploring ancient Africa. Episode 2 deals with exploring the pre-Columbian Americas. And we also have the coloring book and the full color story book. You can buy these individually, or we have them in a bundle pack that also includes Afro Man and the Protectors of the Book of Knowledge. That's available right now at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We also have the new bundle pack, The Africans That Were Here Before Columbus. The Africans That Were Here Before Columbus is an 8 DVD bundle pack. We know October 12th commemorates Columbus uncovering the so-called New World and laying the foundation for slavery, racism, capitalism, and the exploitation of indigenous people. And some people still celebrate that here in this country. I don't know why. Other people celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. But in that bundle pack, you get the double lecture I did with Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. You get a lecture from Dr. Ivan Van Sertima dealing with They Came Before Columbus. There's one from Dr. John Henry Clark dealing with Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust. There's a double lecture from myself dealing with Columbus and the African Moors, as well as the history of Halloween and some other ones in there as well. That's the 8 DVD bundle pack, The Africans That Were Here Before Columbus. That is, I think that's on sale, $70 at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, right on the homepage. So order those today. All right. So, you know, there was this crazy story came out of Mississippi. I did 3 broadcasts this past week about them. They're on YouTube. Michael Imhotep on YouTube, IMHOTEP. And then also we have the audio podcast as well. Just search for the African History Network show wherever you get your audio podcasts, or go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Right on the homepage, click on Listen to Podcasts. You have a sitting U.S. Senator named Cindy Hyde Smith, who was a Democrat up until 2010, and she switched to the Republican Party. She was appointed to be U.S. Senator to fill out the remaining term of a Republican senator named Thad Cochran, who had to resign because of health issues. But she was on the campaign trail early in November, around November 2nd or 3rd, and she made a comment about attending a public hanging. Now, she was invited to speak at a campaign event by a Tupelo, Mississippi rancher named Colin Hutchinson. Okay? And on the when she was there at the event, she said, if he invited me to a public hanging, I'd be on the front row. If he invited me to a public hanging, I would be on the front row. Okay? Now, that kind of reminds me of Bob Uecker, Mr. Baseball, back in the day. And you remember in the Bud Light commercials, I think it was, he used to say, I must be in the front row. But he wasn't in the front row at a public hanging. So once this video was released, it went viral, and people were shocked at what she was saying. Because wait a second, this is Mississippi. Mississippi has a long history of lynching African Americans. You know, out of the 4,743 people that were lynched from 1882 to 1968, 581 of those lynchings took place in Mississippi. 1/8 of them took place in Mississippi. And the NAACP has information about this at their website, NAACP.org. They have a whole page dealing with the history of lynchings. Okay? And then, you know, 72.7% of those people, 3,446 who were lynched from 1882 to 1968, 72.7% were African American. 1,297 white people were lynched also because, you know, the Klan, they were lynching white people too, especially white Republicans. Because when you understand the history of the Civil War in the North and the South, and then you understand that the Democratic Party early on was the party of many of the Southern plantation owners, okay, and the slaveholders, many of them. So after slavery ends, you have the Southerners looking at the Republicans as the enemy because that was the party of Lincoln, okay? The Republican Party was the party of Lincoln. It's not the party of Lincoln anymore. It's the party of the first Russian president of the United States named Donald John Trump. But that's a whole nother story. This is why you have to understand a continuation of history. Because when I hear Republicans coming to me talking about joining the party of Lincoln, I'm like, okay, you need to study history after the Civil Rights Act of '64 and the Voting Rights Act of '65. But these comments from Senator Cindy Hyde Smith, she's not a state senator, she's a U.S. senator, right, have drawn a whole lot of criticism. Representative Benny Smith of the Congressional Black Caucus, Democrat from Mississippi, demanded a public apology for all Mississippians. He said he released a statement this past Monday, November 12th, calling the senator's comments on public hanging, quote, beyond disrespectful and offensive, beyond disrespectful and offensive, adding that Mississippi's history includes, quote, one of the highest numbers of public lynching that we know of than any other state in this country, end quote. Now, she released, Senator Cindy Hyde Smith released a statement this past Sunday, okay? And it talked about, she tried to explain away the comments. Now, she has not apologized for the comments either, people. We have to understand this, okay? She has not apologized for the comments either. And what she said was, okay, so the comments were originally made on November 2nd. She said, quote, in a comment on November 2nd, I referred to accepting an invitation to a speaking engagement. In referencing the one who invited me, I used an exaggerated expression of regard. In any attempt to turn this into a negative connotation is ridiculous. This is how she explained this, an exaggerated expression of regard. Now, I never heard that expression before. Is this like a term of endearment, like using the N-word is a term of endearment? Is this how they trying to explain this away? Joking about a public lynching in Mississippi, where Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney were killed June 21st, 1964, where Medgar Evers was assassinated by Byron Della Beckwith in Jackson, Mississippi in June of 1963? Is this how they trying to explain this away? Exaggerated expression of regard? Okay? So then you have at a news conference that took place this past week, she was there with Governor Phil Bryant, the governor of Mississippi, who appointed her as U.S. Senator. He's a Republican also, okay? He was there, and the topic came up at the news conference. Now, you have to understand this news conference, right? The news conference was, the press conference was put on by the National Right to Life Committee because they were endorsing her to be U.S. Senator, okay? So she was there to accept the endorsement. But the media didn't want to talk about that. They wanted to talk about her public hanging comments, all right? Well, it didn't turn out quite how she thought it was going to. Let's take a listen to what happened.
Put out a statement yesterday, and we stand by that statement.
Could you expand on it then, why you said it, what you meant by it, and why people in the state should not see it as offensive?
We put out the statement yesterday, and it's available, and we stand by that statement.
Senator, are you familiar with Mississippi's history of lynchings?
I put out a statement yesterday, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Governor
You mentioned that it shouldn't be viewed with a negative connotation. Could you at least explain
I put out a
how
statement
it could be
yesterday,
positive?
and we stand by the statement, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Is that phrasing in your everyday lingo, in your vocabulary? Do you use
I
that
put out
phrase?
a statement yesterday.
Governor, you
Stand by the
appointed
statement.
her as a United States Senator. You have a huge black population that are looking for answers on why she used that kind of language. And you have worked to try to make it known that Mississippi no longer has that past. When you're hearing her say, I put out a statement yesterday, and that's all
I think she is, she's certainly addressing the fact that she has put out a statement. I can tell you all of us in public life have said things on occasion that we could have phrased better. When you make as many speeches as we do in public life, that does occur. But I know this woman and I know her heart. I knew it when I appointed her. I know it now. She meant no offense by that statement. There was nothing in her heart of ill will. Now, in a political campaign, people can make anything you say what they want it to say. They can spin it. They can go on social media and accuse you of all sorts of things.
Governor,
She feels certain that, I believe, I won't speak for her, but that her statement spoke to it. Absolutely, we have been sensitive to race relations in this state. I brought the President of the United States here to open the Civil Rights Museum. And African-American leadership that would fail to even come to the event because the President of the United States was there. Today I talked about the genocide of over 20 million African-American children. You see, in my heart, I am confused about where the outrage is at about 20 million African-American children that have been aborted. No one wants to say anything about that. No one wants to talk about that.
Okay, so okay, now you got to understand what happened. We're gonna play that again too. Because you have to hear it again just to take in all this foolishness. Now, people, elections have consequences. That's the governor of Mississippi. I'm trying to tell you, these people are crazy. You have to vote them out of office. This is a sitting U.S. senator. There are only 100 in the country. This is a sitting U.S. senator and the governor. Now, you know that campaign, that ad campaign from Southwest Airlines, Want to Get Away? You know, I think they can make this to a Southwest Airlines commercial because he wasn't helping her case at all. This fool sat up here and said, I invited Donald Trump to the opening of the Civil Rights Museum in Mississippi, and by golly, I can't figure out why African-American civil rights leaders didn't want to show up. You pick the president that black people hate the most in the last 50 years. You pick him, who's anti-civil rights, and invite him to the opening of the Civil Rights Museum. You can't figure out why Benny Thompson didn't want to attend. You can't figure out why Representative John Lewis from Georgia, who's a civil rights hero, you can't figure out why they didn't want to attend. And Trump has not denounced voter suppression. Trump is anti-civil rights. Trump nominates a white supremacist from Alabama named Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III to be his attorney general. In 1986, when Jeff Sessions was facing the Senate Judiciary Committee to be confirmed as a federal judge, he was deemed too racist to be a federal judge. He applauded and cheered the gutting of the Voting Rights Act of 2013, the Supreme Court case of 2013, Shelby County versus Holder. He wanted to back out of the consent decrees with the Baltimore Police Department and the Chicago Police Department when he became Attorney General. He's against holding police officers accountable, and you can't figure out why civil rights leaders didn't want to attend because you invited Donald Trump. This is the governor who just said that. Then he tries to deflect from the public hanging comments because Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith still has not apologized. He talks about, I know her heart. Well, why didn't she apologize then? Why didn't she say, I'm sorry if you misunderstood what I was saying, I know Mississippi has a very horrible history of lynchings of African Americans. I meant nothing by it. She hadn't said anything like that. This is what this fool said. In a comment on November 2nd, I referred to accepting an invitation to a speaking engagement, and referencing the one who invited me, I used an exaggerated expression of regard, and any attempt to turn it into a negative connotation is ridiculous. Okay? How do you turn... wait a second. Hold on. People in the South, call us, 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600. Look, I've been to Mississippi. It's been a long time. I've been to Mississippi. I've been to Tennessee. I've been to Texas. I've been to Florida. I'm in Atlanta 2 or 3 times a year. I've been to Atlanta. I've been to Stone Mountain, Georgia. You ever been to Stone Mountain, Georgia? Do you realize in Stone Mountain, Georgia, they have a huge mountain with carved into the side of the mountain are 3 Confederate heroes, General Robert E. Lee, P.G.T. Beauregard, and Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy. These were 3 slave owners who took up arms against the Union to maintain slavery in their respective states. Robert E. Lee was from Virginia. He wasn't even from Atlanta. That's in Stone Mountain, Georgia right now. I've been to Stone Mountain, Georgia. I ain't even hear that expression there. 313-778-7600. If you African Americans in the South, you ever heard this expression? If he invited me to a public hanging, I'd be on the front row. If you heard it, it was not positive. I guarantee you. If you heard that expression, it probably was not positive. They may have been looking at you too when they said it. I've never heard that expression before. This is a sitting U.S. senator who said this. Senator Cindy Hyde Smith. Now the runoff election is November 27th, Tuesday, November 27th. Now, African Americans there in Mississippi, and all the right thinking, good people there in Mississippi, you got to ask yourself a question. Now, either the public hanging woman, Cindy Hyde Smith, is going to be the U.S. Senator, or Mike Espy, African American man who's a Democrat, is going to be U.S. Senator. Who do you want to be a U.S. Senator? Just because you don't vote doesn't mean they're going to cancel the election. If you don't like neither one of them, your taxpayer dollars are still going to pay for their salaries. Your taxpayer dollars are still going to pay for the laws that they write in the law and vote on. So who do you want to be your U.S. Senator? We're coming up on the break. We'll continue this on the other side of the break, because then she got into more hot water because of another video that surfaced this past Thursday about her joking about voter suppression at other colleges there in Mississippi. Who are the other colleges you're talking about? I don't think you're talking about white Republicans. She talked about voter suppression against liberals at other colleges. We're going to deal with this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show, 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, November 18th, 2018. 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Watch us on Facebook, 9:10 a.m. Superstation on Facebook, or the African History Network show. We have Anita Kent, we have Glenda, we have Nicole also watching us, just a few of the people watching us on Facebook. All right, so for children, people always ask me, what do you have for children to teach them our history? We have the Meltrek animated series that deals with exploring ancient Africa and exploring pre-Columbian America. Take a listen to this.
Accurate historical account of African American people. A story that has never been told like this before. Join Bunchy. Made Productions presents Meltrek, Episode 1, Exploring Ancient Africa. Witness the most accurate historical account of African American people. A story that has never been told like this before. Join Bunchy, Chen, Percy, Michelle, and Jesse as they open their third eyes and are sent back in time by their magical teacher, Miss Lawful. They begin their adventure in ancient Africa in the Nile Valley. There, they meet a young Egyptian boy named Ramesses. Using hip-hop, funky beats, and rhymes, Ramesses teaches the children about the great kingdoms of Africa. They explore the Nile Valley.
The Nile Valley was a place of Ghana is the first
non-stop. Land of the gold that they sold
Mali
non-stop.
and Songhai,
Mali and Songhai must have had some serious armies.
the Congo,
The Congo region is beautiful.
Zimbabwe,
Zimbabwe's where we land.
and Zulu. Witness the mental and spiritual transformation of the characters. Not only will they transform, but you will also as you travel with Meltrek. Let's resurrect the spirit of our ancestors inside all of us and recall that we all come from greatness, so we can be great.
We're going to a different time zone where our ancestors always sat on the throne. Yeah, and I'm talking about you and me. Our pigmentation considered greatest in royalty. So rise up, sons and daughters of a KB land. It's time to claim our riches and take back our land. So come and take this journey, and when you come back, tell your friends and family all about the mail track. Mail track, mail track, mail track, mail track, mail track.
All right, that's available right now at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can order the episodes and the coloring book and the storybook individually, or we have them in the bundle pack. We also have the 8 DVD bundle pack, The Africans That Were Here Before Columbus, The Africans That Were Here Before Columbus. And also on demand, we have the 10-course online bundle pack of online courses that I teach. That's on sale, $60, regularly $130. That includes Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, and that's all on demand. Watch from around the world. Okay, so right before the break, we were talking about this crazy case out of Mississippi. Now, I've seen some strange things come out of Mississippi, but this is one of the strangest ones in recent times. Senator Cindy Hyde Smith, on November 2nd, was on the campaign trail for midterm elections. And she made a crazy, crazy statement. She said, if he invited me to a public hanging, I'd be on the front row. She was referring to, she was in Tupelo, Mississippi. She was referring to Colin Hutchinson, who's a cattle rancher, who invited her there to that little campaign rally. Well, those comments went viral. They were recorded, went viral, caused a lot of controversy. She released a statement. She has not apologized for it. She calls it an exaggerated expression of regard. Hasn't apologized for it at all. And then she held a press conference. Well, she was at a press conference announcing a endorsement from the National Right to Life Committee, okay? And she refused to answer questions about it. Then the Governor Phil Bryant was there, and he tried to come to her aid, but he made things even worse. Let's take a listen to this again. You got to hear this again, because this is crazy. Let's take a listen to this again.
I had a statement yesterday, and we stand by that statement.
Could you expand on it then, why you said it, what you meant by it, and why people in the state should not see it as offensive?
We put out the statement yesterday, and it's available, and we stand by that statement.
Senator, are you familiar with Mississippi's history of lynchings?
I put out a statement yesterday, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
You mentioned that it shouldn't be viewed with a negative connotation. Could you at least explain
I put out a
how
statement
it could be
yesterday, and we stand by the statement, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Is that phrasing in your everyday lingo, in your vocabulary? Do you use that phrase?
I put out a statement yesterday.
Governor, you appointed her as a United States Senator. You have a huge black population that are looking for answers on why she used that kind of language. And you have worked to try to make it known that Mississippi no longer has that past. When you're hearing her say, I put out a statement yesterday, and that's all
I think she is, she's certainly addressing the fact that she has put out a statement. I can tell you all of us in public life have said things on occasion that we could have phrased better. When you make as many speeches as we do in public life, that does occur. But I know this woman, and I know her heart. I knew it when I appointed her. I know it now. She meant no offense by that statement. There was nothing in her heart of ill will. Now, in a political campaign, people can make anything you say what they want it to say. They can spin it. They can go on social media and accuse you of all sorts of things.
Governor,
she feels certain that, I believe, I won't speak for her, but that her statement spoke to it. Absolutely, we have been sensitive to race relations in this state. I brought the President of the United States here to open the Civil Rights Museum. And African-American leadership that would fail to even come to the event because the President of the United States was there. Today I talked about the genocide of over 20 million African-American children. You see, in my heart, I am confused about where the outrage is at about 20 million African-American children that have been aborted. No one wants to say anything about that. No one wants to talk about that.
Okay, so watch the videos I did this past week dealing with that, because I went into depth into his comments about abortion. It goes beyond that. This is an excerpt of the press conference, because he made Mississippi Today fact-checked his statements and found a lot of his statements were either wrong or the sources he said he got it from, because he was citing Wikipedia for some of his comments dealing with abortion. He was citing Wikipedia, okay? And Mississippi Today did a fact check on him. So you have to go watch the videos I did on YouTube this past week dealing with this. Now, in a statement this past Sunday, Mike Espy, who is running for that U.S. Senate seat, and he's a former three-term member of the U.S. House of Representatives from 1987 to 1993, he called Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith's comments reprehensible. He said, quote, "They have no place in our political discourse in Mississippi or our country. We need leaders, not dividers," and her words show that she lacks the understanding and judgment to represent the people of our state, end quote. Now, many critics of Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith's comment noted the history of racism and hangings in Mississippi, as well as we talked about. NAACP National President Derek Johnson said in a statement this past Sunday, quote, Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith's, he said Hyde-Smith's decision to joke about hanging when the history of African Americans is marred by countless incidents of this barbarous act is sick. Any politician seeking to serve as a national voice of the people of Mississippi should know better, end quote. Okay? So you have this, and you have people responding to it. Read the article from the Washington Post, WashingtonPost.com. A senator refuses to apologize for joking about public hanging in a state known for lynchings. A senator refuses to apologize for joking about public hanging in a state known for lynchings. Now, this past week on Roland Martin's daily digital show, Roland Martin Unfiltered, he interviewed Mike Espy, and he covered this story. So you can watch that on YouTube. Just search for Roland Martin on YouTube as well. Now, things got worse for her. And we'll go to the phone lines in just a minute here. 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. Things got worse for her because on Thursday, November 15th, another video surfaced of her joking about voter suppression. So in a video that was tweeted Thursday afternoon, okay, and it was tweeted by Lamar White Jr., who's the same blogger and journalist who tweeted the first video. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith was telling a small crowd in Starkville, Mississippi, that, quote, "They remind me that there's a lot of liberal folks in those other schools who maybe we don't want to vote. Maybe we want to make it just a little more difficult. And I think that's a great idea." What other schools is she talking about there in Mississippi? She's not talking about other schools. She's not talking about up north. She's talking about Mississippi. She said, quote, "They remind me that there's a lot of liberal folks in those other schools who maybe we don't want to vote. Maybe we want to make it just a little more difficult. And I think that's a great idea." So a lot of people think she's talking about HBCUs there in Mississippi. Okay? So her campaign said Thursday that the senator was joking and that the video was selectively edited. Why would you joke about voter suppression when you have all this talk about voter suppression coming out of Georgia? When you had the Voting Rights Act, Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act gutted because of Shelby County versus Holder in 2013, and that played a big part in the 2016 election. Why would you joke about voter suppression like that? So a spokeswoman from Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith's campaign, her name is Melissa Scallon, said, quote, obviously, Senator Hyde-Smith was making a joke, and clearly the video was selectively edited. Well, where's the full video that wasn't selectively edited? You have a copy of that? Where's that? She said, quote, now the liberal media wants to talk about anything other than Mike Espy's record of corruption and taking $750,000 and lying about it from an African dictator now charged with war crimes, including murder, rape, and torture, end quote. So they brought up this story dealing with the African dictator out of, which country was that? I forgot which African country this was, but this was when he was in the House of Representatives, okay? And let me see, it was, I have to look at it. I did some research on that. It was an article from Mississippi Today that that talked about that, okay? But they wanted to deflect and not deal with these comments also. Now, in the email to the Washington Post, Melissa Scallon said Cindy Hyde-Smith's comments about voting came on November 3rd while the senator was, quote, talking to 4 freshmen at Mississippi State University about an idea to have polling places on college campuses. Quote, that's what she said was a great idea. Quote, someone pointed out that college campuses were liberal, and that's when she made the joke about not wanting everyone to vote. That was a joke. The polling places on college campuses is what she said was a great idea. Well, you go watch that video. That's not the way it appeared. Now, Mike Espy's communications director, his name is Danny Blanton. He said that Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith talking about voter suppression was, quote, not a laughing matter, end quote, and called her a, quote, unquote, walking stereotype. He said for a state like Mississippi, where voting rights were obtained through sweat and blood, everyone should appreciate that this is not a laughing matter. Mississippians deserve a senator who represents our best qualities, not a walking stereotype who embarrasses our state, okay? Then the article goes in and talks about in 2013, the Supreme Court invalidated a key part of the Voting Rights Act in 1965, effectively allowing officials in southern states such as Mississippi to change election laws without federal approval, because Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act enforced that to have any election laws changed, to have the number of weeks or number of weeks that you have or days you have for early voting, to change polling places, you had to get approval from a federal. These southern states that had a history of putting in obstacles to African Americans being able to vote, they had to get approval from a federal judge. Because of the Supreme Court case of Shelby County versus Holder of 2013, which gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, that changed that. All this deals with law, people. All this deals with law. Okay? Immediately after that, states started putting in new voter suppression laws. 2016 election cycle, read the article from thenation.com. There were 868 fewer polling places in this country in the 2016 election cycle. 868 fewer polling places. 14 new states had new voter ID laws. 2016 election cycle. It continues now because Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was gutted. Okay? All right, so check out this article also from Washington Post. GOP senator, it's a great idea to make it harder for liberal folks to vote. Okay? Check that article out as well. And then AtlantaBlackStar.com had a good one as well. Mississippi governor ignores furor over Hyde-Smith's public hanging comment. Instead rails about black genocide abortions. Okay, there was one from Mississippi Today, and you can look at some of the articles from Mississippi Today as well, because it gave some background information on dealing with Mike Espy and the allegations of when he was doing some lobbying work, okay? Let me see here. Oh, actually, it was an article from the Sun Herald that I read about this. SunHerald.com. SB accused of taking more payments than admitted from African leader on trial for atrocities. Okay, that's from November 15th, 2018. That's from this past Thursday. Read that article. Okay, that deals with the former president of Ivory Coast. Okay, and it's dealt with some lobbying work that Mike Espy did, but the Hyde Smith campaign wanted to deflect to that. Going back quickly to the story of Jemel Roberson, I forgot to tell you, it was an article from New York Daily News. Kanye West has donated $150,000 to Jemel Roberson's family through a GoFundMe campaign, a GoFundMe page that the family set up. Okay. New York Daily News has an article about this. Kanye West donates $150,000 to GoFundMe for Jemel Roberson, Chicago security guard killed by police. This is from today, November 18th. And Kanye West made the payments in 10 increments because the most you can donate to GoFundMe is $15,000. So he made the donations in 10 increments. The GoFundMe page was set up to help cover burial expenses after he was killed doing his job at a Chicago area nightclub. Okay, a representative for GoFundMe confirmed Kanye West's donations to the New York Daily News. Thanks in part to the rapper's cash, the page has so far raised more than $300,000. All right, so read that article also. Want to make sure we talked about that. Since we talk about stupid things Kanye does, we need to talk about good things also. Okay, let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Briggs, line 1. Thanks for holding. Tell us what city you're calling from.
Yes, sir. I'm calling from Livonia, Michigan.
Livonia, okay. Go ahead with your question or comment.
Okay, I just want to make a quick comment.
Go ahead.
What's going on down in Mississippi as well as other states within the United States shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, especially us blacks. This has been going on for years, and next week we'll hear another story pertaining to discrimination and some of these vile acts that these white people that's running for office are doing. And it's all, if you notice, it's all starting to come out under this Trump administration. Mm-hmm. Since he's been in office, a lot of these people that's been hiding their bigotry and racism up under rocks, Trump has given them a voice. The same lady, I bet you 5-6 years ago, she wouldn't have made a statement like that. She wouldn't have came out.
Right.
Because the climate wasn't right for that. And as far as Kanye West, I think he's just like a little bit on a guilt trip. He knows that his past actions didn't sit well, especially among us blacks. And I believe he's doing his best to get back in on our good side. It's a good gesture. I appreciate it, and I'm quite sure the family does.
Right.
However, I think he's had a come-to-Jesus moment, and I think he's trying to make right of some of the mistakes he's made in the past. To the voters down in Mississippi, this should get the black voters to band together and get out to the polls for this upcoming election with this lady. And I do believe there are some good white people down there. There's a such thing, I believe, and they wouldn't want a reputation of having somebody in Senate that's representing them with those kind of views. And so it's time for us blacks to stop talking about it and let's get behind each other and pull together and use our voting powers before they strip that away.
Absolutely. All right, man. Thanks for calling. Thanks for calling.
Thanks for taking the call, sir.
Okay, no problem. All right. We'll go to the next call in just a second here. Also, let's see. Okay, so read that article from New York Daily News dealing with Kanye West. Okay, and I think Kanye's back on his meds. I think that's why he's acting like he has some sense now. I think he's back on his medication, which is good. He needs to be on his meds. Okay, let's go quickly to line 2. Let's go to Baraka. Hey, Baraka, welcome to the African History Network show. Thanks for holding. Tell us, which city are you calling from?
Calling from Detroit.
Detroit. Okay, go ahead with your question or comment.
Yes, how you doing?
All right, how are you?
Yes, I wanted to ask you, do you can you recall the quote by Frantz Fanon that starts out by saying something like each generation must discover its mission, betray it or fulfill it?
Yes.
Is that the total?
Go ahead.
Did I get it right?
There's something like that. Yeah, well, go ahead.
Okay, that's all I wanted.
I don't remember the exact quote, but yeah, I remember that. Frantz Fanon, Wretched of the Earth. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yep. Okay, thanks for calling. All right. Let's shift gears here. Remember, we have the Mel Trek series, the Mel Trek DVDs, the animated series for our children at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, that teaches them their history, and we have them in a bundle pack. So, on Friday, Stacey Abrams ended her campaign for governor, lamenting voting irregularities that she said tainted the election, but acknowledging that former Georgia Secretary of State Brian Kemp will be declared the winner. Now, Stacey Abrams had hoped to become the nation's first elected African-American female governor, and she had worked to force a runoff election against Brian Kemp, who, as of late this past Thursday, led by 54,801 votes out of 3.9 million votes cast. So she was short 55,000 votes out of 3.9 million votes cast, right? She was, listen to me, people, she was 18,000 votes short of forcing a runoff election between her and Brian Kemp. 18,000 votes short. I read an article from Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. And it talked about how there were at least 6.9 million people registered to vote as of October of this year. Okay? So you had about 7 million people registered to vote. Only 4 million voted in this election. I'm talking about in Georgia. You had about 7 million people registered to vote in Georgia. 4 million voted. Now, that was a record for a midterm election, the number of people who voted. But there were 3 million, at least 3 million registered voters in Georgia who did not vote in the midterm election that was held November 6th. Stacey Abrams was only 18,000 votes short of forcing a runoff election between her and Brian Kemp, because there was this libertarian in the race who got 1% of the vote, less than 1% of the vote. So so now the people in Georgia are going to be stuck with Brian Kemp, who's a big supporter of Donald Trump, as their governor. Now, Stacey Abrams was on AM Joy, Joanne Reed, I think that was yesterday morning. Let's take a listen to this clip.
I acknowledge that former Secretary of State Brian Kemp will be certified as the victor in the 2018 gubernatorial election. But to watch an elected official who claims to represent the people in this state baldly pin his hopes for election on the suppression of the people's democratic right to vote has been truly appalling. This is not a speech of concession, because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that. But my assessment is the law currently allows no further viable remedy.
10 days after the polls closed, Stacey Abrams ended her campaign for Georgia governor with a strong rebuke of the state's electoral system, saying the state and its Secretary of State, who doubled as its Republican candidate for governor, failed the state's voters. In the end, she received about 55,000 fewer votes than Brian Kemp in a contest marred by clear signs of widespread voter suppression that disproportionately impacted African Americans. According to an AP investigation last month, Kemp's office had 53,000 voter registration applicants still pending, 70% of whom were African American. Many of those prospective voters may not have even known that their registrations were on hold. Abrams says that she will continue the fight to make sure all Georgians get to exercise their right to vote. And Stacey Abrams joins me now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, first of all, a lot of the results on election night were very mixed. Nationwide for Democrats, it was actually a really strong result, a really great blue wave. But there was a lot of anxiety and depression, quite frankly, among Democrats about your race, about Andrew Gillum's race. And in your race in particular, because so many, over 1 million voters had been suppressed, if you add up all of the people who were denied the opportunity to even register. And so a lot of people felt like the result is not legitimate. Do you consider the result in Georgia to be legitimate?
I think that it's legal. I think it's wrong. I think that what happened is that we have watched a systematic erosion of our democracy. And over the course of time, that was overseen directly by my opponent in the race, who also happened to be responsible for the administration of fair elections, and he didn't do so. And that's why I'm pushing for Fair Fight Georgia, because this wasn't simply a partisan issue. It I think, was most notable because of my race. But on December 4th, there's going to be a runoff actually not a runoff, a redo of an election because of a flawed ballot in a Republican district. And depending on which county you lived in, you might have gotten your absentee ballot counted. This is a systemic erosion of our administration of elections, and it started and became perfected by Brian Kemp. You've been really in a battle with Brian Kemp since I've known you, since 2014. We met as fellow guests on this very hour. When you were trying to register voters, and in and out of court with him as he, as Secretary of State, was trying to take voters off. So he puts them on, he takes them off. So this has really been a long-time battle between the two of you. I think a lot of people around the country don't understand how it can even be legal for the same person who's in charge of deciding who gets to vote to also be running. A lot of people don't understand how that can even be possible. Was it statutorily made possible by the legislature of Georgia that Brian Kemp could do both of those things? Well, and that's why I think it's important to use the right terminology. What he did was legal. That does not make it right. And it began long before he and I engaged in 2014 with the erosion of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, with the systemic disinvestment in communities across the state of Georgia. We have seen a wholesale collapse of the authenticity of our elections. And that's why this is so important, because I don't want this to be considered a battle between me and Mr. Kemp. That's not what this is about. This is an inflection point in a long-standing approach to erosion of democracy, using our democratic laws to try to actually erase people from our democracy, and that's wrong, no matter who's doing it, no matter who takes advantage of it. Now, yes, the law said that he could be Secretary of State, but morals and ethics say you don't oversee your own victory. The law says that you can remove voters for inactivity, but that inactivity should be grounded in something like them moving away or dying, but not simply the fact that they used their democratic right not to vote, not to make a choice. And so he used legal apparatus to disenfranchise, to disinvest, and to grossly mismanage these elections, and not simply my election, but election after election for the last 8 years. Yeah, and of course, Georgia is a very particular state. I mean, the South is the South. It's where most African Americans still live. 32% of the population of your state is African American. Kemp squeaked in with a 55,000 vote margin out of nearly 4 million votes cast. You also have, when you break down the results by ethnicity, he got 74% of the white vote, which is 60% of the population. You got 93% of the African American vote, 62% of the Hispanic Latino vote. It annoys me that people can't figure out how to get enough data to count Asian American voters, but there we are. I'm going to ask you a similar question that I asked to Andrew Gillum. How does somebody like Brian Kemp, who ran the way he did and who did the things that he did, govern a state as diverse as Georgia? He's going to have to try hard. And I think that's part of the opportunity that we have in the aftermath of this election. I'm actually proud of the fact that I increased the number of white voters in the Democratic column by a factor of at least, we increased it by at least 4%. The average has been 23%. Hillary.
Okay, we run out of time here. This is a really good interview. You can watch it at msnbc.com. Post-Georgia governor race, Stacey Abrams vows to make sure electoral system works. That's from this morning, November 18th, AM Joy, MSNBC. So watch that clip in its entirety, okay? Because also she has Sherilyn Ifill on in that same segment of the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund. Read the article from NBCnews.com. Hate crimes in America spiked 17% last year. FBI says, we'll talk about that next time. And then New York Times reported Jeff Sessions in last-minute act sharply limits use of consent decrees to curb police abuses. Former Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III has drastically limited the ability of federal law enforcement officials to use court-enforced agreements to overhaul local police departments accused of abuses and civil rights violations, the Justice Department announced a couple of Thursdays ago. This article came out November 8th, 2018. In a major last-minute act, Jeff Sessions signed a memorandum on Wednesday before Donald Trump fired him, sharply curtailing the use of so-called consent decrees, court-approved deals between the Justice Department and local governments that create a roadmap of changes for law enforcement and other institutions. The move means that the decrees used aggressively by the Obama-era Justice Department officials to fight police abuses, and there were about 25 investigations into the patterns and practices of police departments, which yielded 14 or 15 consent decrees, the most out of any previous administration. Okay. This means that they will be more difficult to enact because of this measure taken by Jeff Sessions. Sessions had signaled he would pull back on their use soon after he took office, when he ordered a review of the existing agreements, including the police departments in Baltimore, Chicago, and Ferguson, Missouri, enacted amid a national outcry over the deaths of African-American men at the hands of police officers. Jeff Sessions imposed 3 stringent requirements for the agreements. Top political appointees must sign off on the details rather than the career lawyers who have done so in the past. Department lawyers must lay out evidence of additional violations beyond unconstitutional behavior, and the deals must have a sunset date rather than being in place until police or other law enforcement agencies have shown improvement. This is an example of how elections have consequences, because he was nominated by Donald Trump. Okay, read this article from New York Times. Session in last-minute act sharply limits use of consent decrees to curb police abuses. Hey, I'll see you all this Friday, November 23rd, Black Friday, at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, for their Black Friday marketplace is open to the public, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's a free event. African American vendors will be there. We'll have a vendor table for the African History Network. Our DVDs will be there also. We'll put up the flyer at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And we have the Mail Trek series. Order these today. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, animated series for our children. And you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. Hey, everybody have a safe and happy Thanksgiving, even if you don't celebrate it. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent. Right now, it's correct wrong behavior. Right now, it's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.